and we'll convene the meeting of the PPJ. Roll call. Janet.
Paul Burning. Bob Fiedler. Dan Hansen. Kathy Leaf.
Here.
Shelley Tomczyk.
Present.
I'm sorry, everybody. Okay. Approval of the minutes. Can I have a motion to approve our last meeting's minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
Any objections? Hearing no objections, they're approved. Public comment. I see there's nobody here for public comment. And we'll move on to our business items. He's not on here yet. He's not. Carl. No. Okay, we'll move right to the financial report. Our county administrator.
Thank you. I had to remember which thing I had to unmute here. So the financial report is in the packet. I don't know if Mike's going to start sharing that screen or not. Basically, though, we're at 10 months through the year. If you look at where we're at in all of the departments, we're on target to finish the year exactly the way we thought we would in the way that we typically do. We're going to end up in the black in all of the departments. You will see, scattered throughout the departments, the additional expenses we've had for COVID-related items. We did exceed the routes to recovery grant amount of $1.4 million. We submitted over $1.6 million in expenses, and we will see those revenues coming back in. Some of them have posted already, but there'll be additional revenues that post. And once those do, that will help the bottom line on all the departments, although even with the additional expenses in there, we're looking pretty good at this point. I would entertain any specific questions that you may have on the financials at this point.
Are there any questions for Administrator Witt? Hearing none, we'll move to our next item on the agenda, Judge Needham with the Circuit Court update.
There's not, again, really a lot to report other than our rather fluid situation as concerns COVID and the courts adjusting to, modifying with the significant increase in numbers of cases, together with some other considerations. We did implement a new operational plan effective this last Monday that puts us back more into a Zoom or remote court system for purposes of pretrials, status conferences, matters that don't require evidence. If it's a hearing that requires some form of testimony, then the party can request to do it remotely. We have to get waivers, other things, but that's our primary objective, is to try to limit the foot traffic coming into the building. Although, as I said, St. Croix County is light years ahead of many other counties in terms of the screening and other protocols that we have, the cleaning, etc. The other major change is that we have effectively suspended all non-constitutionally guaranteed or statutorily mandated jury trials. So we'll still do speedy trial demands, we'll still do detainers, we'll still do termination of parental rights, mental commitments, guardianship jury trials, which are mandated by either the Constitution or the statutes. But for other cases, we effectively put a suspension on those. We don't have an end date. We're going to look at the numbers and reevaluate after the first of the year to see where things are at. But our primary concern was for jurors. And the best example, I was supposed to have started a week-long jury trial this past Monday. And it was a criminal case, which means I have to finish the trial with 12 jurors. In talking to the attorneys, we couldn't come up with a number in terms of how many jurors I might need to finish a week-long trial. With quarantining and isolation, And so the decision was made to basically suspend all of our non-essential jury trials. I think that's consistent with what other counties are doing. Eau Claire is effectively shut down, period, except for remote hearings. They're not doing any other types of proceedings. But they've also, I think, had a larger influx. I know at Mayo and their other hospitals are overrun with COVID. So it's fluid. We're trying to adapt. I, again, thank Mr. Witt and IT. We've had vacancies in our administrative support offices, the clerk's office, the registrar's office, with either individuals being tested positive or family members or daycares being shut down. And I think, as most of you know, our ability to work remotely has been significantly compromised simply because of the nature of our business. But we have now basically secured sufficient laptops for about half of our staff that if we get to that point of having people not able to work, we will be able to permit at least some of them to work remotely. It makes us more efficient, our productivity doesn't drop, but it gives us the same flexibility as many other departments have in terms of people being able to work remotely. We will never shut down. That's the other thing that I think all of you are aware of. The courts will remain open in some way, shape, or form, so that's my report.
Judge, to be honest, when I came in this morning, I had so many questions I was going to ask, given the COVID issue, is how you folks were coping. And in your statement, you answered almost all of them. But just a quick question. Most of the steps you've just taken, those were St. Croix County driven steps, not statewide demanded, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think, as we all remember, when all this hit back in March, April, and May, the Supreme Court came out with statewide rules. They now have significantly backed away from that because I think what happens in Dane County or Milwaukee County isn't what's happening in St. Croix or Sawyer. So they really now have gone to a model of each county decides for themselves based on their systems, based on their, the numbers, et cetera. We still have to get approval from our chief judge, who is a judge in Barron County, but she has been extremely cooperative in understanding that our issues are somewhat unique, being we're a border county and many other things. So yes, the statewide, other than masking and cleaning, which are still required pursuant to the Supreme Court rule, is pretty much each county is to develop their own plan, but with the overarching supervision of your chief judge.
And then I had one more question, and I'll open it up to everybody. You alluded to the fact that many of your folks might have to work remotely, and they may not have the proper equipment now to do so as efficiently as would be ideal. Is that, and I'll look at our county administrator at the same time, is that something that we can work on and work to a conclusion on easily because I know you don't have that many staff that must have needs for equipment, and I suspect we could work something out to fulfill that.
Correct, and that's what I tried to indicate, is that Mr. Witt and John Allegro, we've basically purchased sufficient laptops for half of our staff, because we can't envision a scenario where we wouldn't at least have half people on site, because the courts have to remain open. We have to be able to maintain those essential functions of our offices. So we do have, and I know that they were coordinating with CCAP, which is our court IT system out of Madison, to get them all set up. So we're ready to go, and I know we have right now, I believe, one or maybe two in the clerk of court's office who are working remotely with county equipment that I believe we hopefully, I think, got under the COVID reimbursement model. And so yes, and as I said, I can't thank administration and IT enough for shepherding and helping us navigate this entire scenario.
Are there other questions or observations for Judge Needham?
I had a question, Judge Needham. So the laptops, that's great. Is there also a need for hotspots or internet? I'm not sure, depending on where your staff live, that could still be an issue, right?
Correct, and we have, I believe, the capability to provide a hotspot to some of our staff. I mean, as you said, we have staff that live in Spring Valley and some of our, and I want to be careful, I'll characterize as remote portions of the county in terms of internet access. And so, yes, we do have the ability to do that. And again, everyone has been more than cooperative in making sure that in addition to the laptop, they're going to have the ability to use it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Judge Needham? Hearing none, thank you again, Judge, for all that you and your colleagues do. We really appreciate it, and all your creativity up there. Next item on the agenda, and you might want to address this, Judge, or turn it over to Mike O'Keefe, but it'll be our CJCC report. Mr. O'Keefe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. December is a month when it's an off month from our CJCC council meetings, so most of our subcommittees try to meet. We've got an upcoming executive committee meeting. Substance abuse and mental health will meet in January because Bob Rarrett, our HHS director, he chairs those, so I kind of go with his schedule. We are going to have a domestic violence, family issues, a subcommittee meeting, and criminal justice. And what I'd like to mention about criminal justice subcommittee, we're going to take a look at something called systems mapping. It was a process that we went through probably, I'm going to guess 6 years ago, where we mapped out the criminal justice system and community justice system both in St. Croix County, and really looked at our decision points where we could make improvements. But really, to do that correctly, you've got to back it up with a little bit more data. And I don't know if Ken or the sheriff or somebody can address some of this, but I think our RMS system that's going to be installed in the jail, that was pushed to next summer, I think. This was my understanding. I talked to Captain in the jail. April? Okay. And that'll be one of the big drivers, because when a person comes into the county jail, they collect a lot of data. And that's a lot of data that maybe, hopefully, when we develop this RMS system down there, the sheriff maybe could reach out and talk to other participants in the system to see if there's things that we need collected at the front end. Well, that person is just coming through the doors. So I'm looking forward to that. That'll be a big part of the systems mapping process, and hopefully that'll be something we share with this group here when we're done. We do have a template for it now. We just have to update it because really I looked at it the other day and the day report center is not even in there, so it does need to be updated.
So relative to the systems mapping issue, who takes the lead on that, and how do you think that will play out over the next few months?
Well, I'll probably volunteer at least to take the lead just to coordinate it, because you're going to have to really, bring in the sheriff's office, the district attorney's office, courts. I mean, just everybody involved, and community resources also. Where does a person go if they're referred for mental health services? What's available in our community? That's a big deal. We don't have as much as people would think available for people, but that just, it gives you an idea of what's there. And I think we need to do that exercise again. I think it worked well the first time, but we need to update that map.
I've heard good things about systems mapping as a general issue in this area, and I think that's a great initiative. Would it be helpful if you had somebody from this committee working with you on that project?
I've never turned down assistance.
I was just going to say that I don't know if any of the members of the committee would want to volunteer to work with Mike on it, but I think this is a great new initiative, and it might benefit us to have somebody working with you and trying to contribute to it. Does anybody want to, maybe we need to have more information, but if somebody would like to volunteer, I think Mike has said he'd love to have you. We'll work on that.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I apologize for my tardiness, but I was having some internet issues this morning. If Mike needs help with anything, December is certainly a slow month for me. I can help with some things, whatever he needs.
Great.
I missed what I'm volunteering for. Hopefully, it's not a public flogging or anything.
And a lot of this we can do remotely with each other, you know, with our capabilities. We can have meetings one-on-one and kind of work through some of this.
So I'll thank Supervisor Burning for volunteering, and call on him, Mike, if it's appropriate time-wise.
If I can just chime in, as Mike said, the first time we did that was before we had a CJCC. In fact, that was one of the genesis, really, of forming a CJCC. So 6 years it might be even longer than that, because I know it was John Schultz and Lori Meyer were instrumental in that. I think it was a clerk of courts, a staff member who had a degree in criminal justice, who did kind of the heavy lifting on the actual mapping. But my recollection is that by the time they got done, we spanned probably 12 feet on the wall here in terms of all the decision points from the moment a person enters the criminal justice system to the point when they exit it. And it's a huge undertaking, but one, again, that is generally essential to a CJCC, to this committee, and anyone else who's in those decision points along the line. So it's time to update it, and it sounds like we have a good volunteer to help us get it through.
The other thing I'd like to update the committee on is we're going to probably be interviewing for contracted pretrial services specialist in the Day Report Center. Just as a reminder, that is funded through the Treatment Alternatives and Diversion Grant with some county funding and some monies from the treatment court budget. So it's kind of a mixed mash of funding. But Justice Point from Milwaukee is going to be our contract provider. And I'm working on the contract with them right now, and we should be interviewing probably in 2 weeks, and hopefully start right at the first of the year. So that's going to be a triage position. So this is something new for us. It's a little bit of an experiment for us. But I think it'll pay benefits, and it might open doors for future endeavors, I think. Once we see that a person, when people are on pretrial release or on bond and go to our Day Report Center, if we could kind of try to figure out really where to point that person to, what direction, you know, either mental health, substance abuse, whatever their needs are, I think we're really ahead of the curve if we start doing that in earnest, actually. So I'll keep you updated on that as we move forward.
Are there any questions for Mr. O'Keefe? I had one, and it's a very vague question, and I know that at the Criminal Justice Subcommittee, there had been some consideration of trying to do something very creative to get rid of older cases. I'm not probably getting the nomenclature exactly correct, but I believe Judge Nordstrom had been leading that effort. Has that been able to continue to progress in its thinking toward how we would do it? Either Judge Needham or Mike?
Yeah, I think you're referring to a warrants day, where people that are on warrant status come in and try to clear up some of their old cases or re-enter the system to get those cleared up. Really, COVID has just derailed us on that. I mean, that's just probably not going to happen anytime soon. Counties north of us have done it. I think Burnett's done it, and I think Douglas County has done it with success. There is merit to it to get these folks back in. And, you know, some people just don't know they're on a warrant status, but it'd be nice to get that list out there and say, if you want to come on in and deal with it, or at least re-enter the system so we can, you know, bring a conclusion to your case.
It's not necessarily within the scope of what Mr. O'Keefe just reported on, but in speaking with the sheriff, who's with us today but isn't on the agenda to make an official report, good news, the new jail cells are fully operational. I guess they cleared all the reviews given by the State Corrections Department, and so that's very good news. It would be great, in an ideal world, if members of this committee and members of the full board could, in fact, see how our jail is operated. It's quite something to see. I mean, it's a real small city down there. And I know that this committee regularly, once a year at least, goes down there. But most of the board members have probably never been down to the jail, and it would be extremely interesting for them to do that. However, you mentioned we're in COVID times, and so probably that is not possible now. I think the sheriff probably will join us in January, February to give a more extensive report on it, maybe even to the full board, because it's one of our big budget items, it's one of our big visibility items, and I think is working very well. But probably, just not a definitive statement, but probably our annual visit to the jail will probably also have to be modified or postponed, given its timing for February and the fact that we certainly don't want to take any chances down in the jail setting. So just information for the committee. We'll continue to stay in close touch with the sheriff on that, but probably that will have to be postponed for a short time. But I would encourage everybody, once we get to maybe the summer, that we work closely with the sheriff to see those new cells and how the jail operates. Any other comments from the committee? Hearing no.
This might be directed to Mr. O'Keefe or Judge Needham, but when it was discussed about like a warrant return program, is that a possibility for doing that via remote means, still having a warrant return event, but having it done virtually? I'm not sure if St. Croix is allowing warrant returns without an in-person meeting.
We haven't, I guess, considered it, at least at this point, just because, again, of feeling overwhelmed with other things that are happening, and I'm sure you appreciate that we're dealing daily, with issues. I have shared before that electronic filing I thought would be the bane of my existence, and the reason I probably would retire. But it's really now proven to be very useful because, again, of the numbers of people who are supposed to be coming to court who are either symptomatic or quarantining or have a family member with close contact. So we're getting requests, 2 hours in advance of a hearing saying we can't be there because of A, B, and C, and electronically doing it has really facilitated our ability to do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say in a long way is we can consider it, but it probably isn't going to be at the top of our priority list right now until we get some stability and back to something that at least we can say quasi-normal. But I think it arguably has merit because, likewise, as I'm sure you appreciate, many of our warrants are for out-of-state people. Minnesota, we probably have a third of our warrants that are for Minnesota residents, and offering them an opportunity to take care of the warrant without having to physically come over here, I think has merit. So we'll look at it, but I want to be candid, it's not going to be at the top of our priority list right now.
And Judge, you might want to mention about the Public Defender's Office staffing levels.
Yeah,
right
and
now.
as Ms. Tomczyk knows, our Public Defender's Office in St. Croix is woefully understaffed. They've just had another staff attorney leave them, not because, I think because she wanted to. She had some family issues in California that she believed and I supported were a priority. And so right now, I think to say that office is operating on a shoestring in terms of staffing would be an understatement. They're bringing in their supervisor from Eau Claire to try to help triage and make sure we have coverage. I also know that the attorneys who are primarily assigned to St. Croix have reached their quotas in terms of numbers of cases. And so I think beginning last week, every new case that came in, they were assigning out to private bar. So staff attorneys don't have the capacity to take any more. So we're trying to work with them and try to flexibly make sure that we don't burn the remaining staff out. So there's just a lot going on in the criminal justice system that, again, we're trying to prioritize where we put our fingers in the dike.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the judge or Mr. O'Keefe? Hearing none, we'll move to the resolution in support of increased county child support funding. In just a second, I'll call on Lisa Plunkett to answer make any additional observations or answer questions. But effectively, this is a resolution we seemingly regularly adopt. St. Croix County administers the Child Support Enforcement Program on behalf of the state. Last year, it brought in nearly $1 billion in efforts to help child support and provide health insurance orders for children and modifying or enforcing those orders. Basically, it calls for an additional expenditure from the state government to support this program of $4 million. They anticipate bringing in about $7 million as a result of the additional expenditures. So in a moment, we'll ask if the committee will endorse this resolution to be sent to the county board for further submittal later to the state legislature, the governor, and other entities. But first, I'll call on Lisa Plunkett if she has additional comments she'd like to make and any questions people have.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to indicate that it's a very good resolution. I know there's so many environmental issues and COVID-related issues that the governor has to consider in regarding to funding. And I in no way want to, contradict all of that good other stuff. On another note, for every dollar that is invested in the child support program, we collect $6.20. We do get federal matching for our work, which increases our budget. Our computer system is an old MS-DOS system with function keys. We'd like to get that modernized, and this funding would greatly help that, along with increased staffing and other ways of getting individuals to employment opportunities to think outside of the box for enforcement and administrative tools. So if you have any questions, just let me know.
Are there any questions for Lisa? Hearing none, I would ask that the subcommittee at this time endorse the resolution for increased child support funding. Are there any objections to it? If not, it's unanimous and it's endorsed. The last item on our agenda is our medical examiner's office report, and pleased to call on Patty Schachter.
Thank you, Chairman. If you go into the packet onto page 38, I have our annual report, and then also we're going to start giving you some monthly reports as to what is going on in the medical examiner's office as far as cases. You will see that in November we had a 90% increase in our caseload, which is substantial. Just for your own information, that's not because of COVID. It is in addition to. So our regular capacity in St. Croix County of growing elderly population, we have been talking about this for quite a few years, that this was going to impact the medical examiner's office, and now we can see what that impact looks like. Overall, it's about a 29% growth, and when we first started talking about how the aging population would impact the medical examiner's office, we kind of anticipated that we were going to see a gradual growth. We didn't think it was going to be this big, this fast, but I would anticipate that this will continue for the next decade or so. So I think it's something that Public Protection Committee members need to be aware of. And then what does that look like? So when you see the 32% increase in caseload, that is one of the things that impacts our budget, because investigations certainly cost more because we are a per diem department. If you look at the overall growth that we're seeing, 46% of our caseload is the hospice caseload, and that there is where we have our program coordinator that's helping us. In a perfect world, we had this all planned out on how this was going to work. What we didn't anticipate was the changeover that's happening in the hospice agencies. So hospice nurses, because of caseload, are moving fluidly through the hospice organizations. And right now we have 9 of them in St. Croix County. So there's a lot of choices to be had there. And these hospice agencies are not housed here in St. Croix County. Some are in Minnesota, some are in Eau Claire, some are up north. So that impacts how their work gets done. So we've had to really think outside the box when dealing with our hospice cases. And we're constantly, as people are coming off, people are going on hospice. So we keep pretty much about 125 people on hospice every given day that we're monitoring. If you look at the page that explains the Kovid Summary, you'll see that we had the 21 in county, the 4 removal from state. What that means is that they died outside of St. Croix County, they're COVID positive, and they're being brought to St. Croix County to be cremated. So that there is what removal from state, and we have to issue permits for them. And that's for any death, so that can be a drug overdose that the family brings the decedents back here. So that there is what removal from state means, and that does also impact the work that we do. If you look at our overall cases, we're, as of today, we're at 724. I would anticipate that we will hit the 800. I'm thinking it might be a little bit more, but I'm not sure what the rest of the month is going to look like with just our regular stuff that's going on. That there is more cases than some of our small police departments. So we are, we're working really hard. We're keeping things fluid. One of the things that we're noticing is because of COVID, decedents that are in our custody are with us longer because the family may have COVID, they can't meet with family. Our stay is increasing because of that. And then out-of-state families. We have a lot of people who live here that are not from here. So their next of kin is from out of state. So they want to come here, and they've got to make those arrangements. We have 6 outstanding autopsies right now. So that there you can estimate is about $15,000, and that doesn't count what autopsies we will have in December. And then one of the good things that we're really excited on is we were asked to participate in a global podcast series on suicide prevention. So we're going to be working with a group that's here, and then Latin America and Europe. We have worked on some of the first steps to it, talked to Adam about, the things that we can do to work on it, but it's a great opportunity for the work that we've done in suicide prevention in St. Croix County to really be stepped up and shown at a bigger level. So we're very excited as a department, we're very excited about that. Other than that, that's all I have.
Well, that's an enormous, challenging and difficult area. We're very lucky to have you, that's for sure. Are there questions for our medical examiner from the committee?
I have one, please.
Fire away, Dan.
All righty. Patty, when we look at the dashboard, we see that we have a certain number of people hospitalized for COVID in the county and a certain number outside of the county. If somebody passes away and they're out of the county, if they're in Minnesota or another county, where is that death counted?
So usually the public health data and the death data are 2 different pieces of data, so people need to understand that piece. If they're tested positive in St. Croix County and then transferred somewhere else out of county and they die, there's a notification. But the only way I learn about them is if they're cremated here in St. Croix County. If they're not cremated here in St. Croix County, I don't hear about them. So that they're the death records and the public health records, they're two separate systems. We have had one case where the decedent died out of county in Wisconsin, and the hospital sent it back to St. Croix County, which made it very complicated for us because we had no idea. When people are alive, they don't tell the medical examiner what's going on unless they're hospice. So we had no idea that this was going on. So it became a big, complicated records request thing, and that particular decedent had been through 4 different counties before they died. So how it gets into the dashboard, that's I have no idea the final answer. I just know that the public health data and the death data are 2 different pieces. Does that answer your question?
Sure. I know every bit as much as I did before. Thank you very much.
I will just observe that you have predicted for the last couple of years anyway this sharp increase in deaths due to our aging population primarily. Is there anything that now suggests, you mentioned that this committee should be aware of it, but are we looking towards something that will be dramatic next year, either in terms of personnel or budget or equipment? I know we have one large equipment purchase that's semi-pending, depending on other matters and grants. But could you just give us some thoughts on what we need to think about for the future? Thank you.
So I think the top priority would be to move Marcy from part-time to full-time to help with all the information collection and everything that we're doing. But just so you know, with our cremation rate at 70%, that there would be able to be paid for by revenues that we are bringing in. She has really, as we've seen these increases happening, it has really helped our efficiency to have someone in the office helping us. So that's our top priority. Right now, I guess our whole thing is we just need to get through the pandemic and then see what happens on the other side. We know that these deaths are going to increase, but it's not just to us. More and more people, elderly, are dying at home, which means law enforcement is impacted, means EMS is impacted, and the medical examiner's office. So that impacts all of our budgets. And because we have the 71% cremation rate, can mean more autopsies. There's just it all goes hand in hand, and cremation is what people are doing now. That is the disposition of choice. But then that just means all of our investigations have to be really done and thorough, and the questions answered in that 48-hour time that we have before the decedent is cremated. So I think the aging population is going to cost all of the public service departments more as we move forward. But we'll have to just wait and see how this looks.
I just have a very general question. I'll look over at our county administrator and given Ms. Shackner's observations about moving an employee from part-time to full-time and the impact on other departments, is that something that's being closely coordinated with the various departments so that it's being anticipated and could potentially be acted on if it becomes critical?
The sheriff and I talk about it all the time, and because it does impact the work that we do. It impacts dispatch with calls. I mean, everything is impacted by it, so but it's up to the policymakers to decide what the budget impact is.
Yeah. At this point, it is not in the 2021 budget. I would anticipate I will receive a request from the medical examiner probably about June of 2021 to increase it in the 2022 budget. So I'm anticipating a lot of requests for positions. So they'll all have to be looked at globally for the entire county to determine where the needs are based upon the amount of resources that we have available for 2022.
I think that's very reasonable, but I would only think, given our crisis now with COVID and potential additional deaths, and if there were something that was required in the very near term, I hope everybody's thinking about that, because I suspect there would be a great deal of support for any activities that were needed to support the medical examiner's office on that. I'll just leave it at that. Any other questions for the medical examiner? Before we move on to the request for future agenda items, I'll note that our district attorney, Mike Niskes, is on the phone with us, or on Zoom with us. Mike, did you have any comments? We deeply appreciated Mike's service, and he was honored 2 days ago at our county board meeting with a very nice recitation of his successes and his wonderful professional career, and we certainly echo that. Mike, would you have any thoughts for us?
My only thought has to do with how my office is dealing with the COVID. So, we have, since March, we have always had attorneys working remotely. We've had county staff and victim witness, diversion, and our support staff working remotely. We were able to purchase some additional computers. They were laptops, so they could do that work easy over the last 8 weeks. With the court's changes, we've gone to a system where we have 3 attorneys daily assigned to be physically present in the building. Everyone else is working remotely. It's more for the social distancing. It's more to make sure that we all don't get it at one time. But we've taken some steps, and hopefully some of those monies will come back. I do believe we have the extra money in our budget if those monies are not recovered through the COVID grant. But we've taken the steps necessary. It's our intent, in discussing with the District Attorney-elect Carl Anderson, to keep on doing that through probably the end of January and into the early part of the year. There are certain parts of the job that can't be done remotely, primarily discovery that our support staff has to be in physically in the office to use that equipment to do out discovery. But the attorneys, by and large, can do most of their work remotely and have been doing that. So in coordinating with the courts, we've been able to keep our caseload up. And I think the district court administrator had informed the judges recently that we were actually disposing of cases faster than they were coming in. So that has helped with that, though we have certain cases that are certain individuals with multiple cases for multiple reasons that are driving our case numbers up. We're running a little hotter, a little bit more cases than the last couple of years. I think that's primarily due to substance abuse. About 10% of our felonies are meth cases. Our domestic abuse cases are up. I think that's because people are too much in their homes with each other. They're confined. There's more substance abuse. There's more stress on the family. So those numbers have gone up. But at this point, and for the immediate future, I think the office is managing very well. On my retirement, it's been a pleasure working with everybody on the staff. I've said that before. I'll repeat something I've said every time. St. Croix County has been a blessing for myself and my family. I'm going to miss it. If it wasn't for the fact of a 3-year-old granddaughter who gets grandpa to do everything she wants, I wouldn't be leaving, but that's the reality of my life. So thank you. And I have to go to do a hearing before Judge Vlack, so I'll sign off.
Real quickly before you leave, thank you, thank you for everything. But we are hoping that there will be some special instances where you'll be able to come back to maybe be a special assistant to the new district attorney on some cases, and so we'll see a lot more of Mike Niskes. Thanks again, Mike.
And I hope to do that too, but that's entirely up to Carl.
Speaking of Carl, Carl will be with us in January, the new district attorney, to give us an introduction to himself and to his office. and we'll look forward to that. Are there future agenda items that people would like to raise? We welcome those suggestions over the course of the next month. Our next meeting will be January 7th.
Say, Bob, could I suggest one thing?
Oh, absolutely, Dan.
I'd like to talk about increasing the vigilance of using masks in the government center, especially in the county boardroom, universally. And perhaps public protection could have an influence on that.
Certainly put that on the agenda and discuss it. That's certainly a good. I noticed everybody in the room today is masked up, and that's a good recommendation. Are there any other suggestions at the moment? Otherwise, we're wide open, of course, over the next 3 weeks to contact myself or Janet to add anything you'd like to the agenda for January. And any announcements or correspondence that Janet's had to leave us, but I don't know if she mentioned anything to Mike. Okay, none at this time. Are there any other comments anybody would like to make before we adjourn?